What is up, guys? It is Pool Party Cards. Today I am here to talk to you guys about how to raise your chances of getting a PSA 10 card when you send them off to grading. First off, if you guys like this type of content, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and when we hit 500 subscribers, we will be running a giveaway. It may be for a sealed box, some cool singles, something like that. So in the comment section below, let me know what your best graded sports or Pokemon card is. But to get into the video here, there are a plethora of reasons why you may want to grade a card. Most common is because you want to raise the value of a card. Often a PSA 10 can double, triple, sometimes even 10x the value of any given card. But there are a bunch of different things to keep in mind before you decide to grade a card. I can show some examples here. One of the most commonly graded type of cards are Prism rookie cards. And here we have a Evan Mobley. Oh, there we go. Evan Mobley Silver Prism rookie. And this was a card that a customer wanted to grade. And service we offer is looking over a card, seeing what we think it could potentially grade, and letting them know whether it's, good or bad to grade it. This was a card that got denied. And on the surface, it doesn't look, like a bad card to grade. The PSA 10 may 4 times the value of this card just off the top of my head. Maybe more, maybe less. But a very common error with Prism cards fresh out of a pack is what's called dimples. Take the card out of the top loader here and show you guys what we mean by that. And this is for a novice grader, maybe something that is very easy to overlook when you send a card to grading. But I don't know if you can tell there, but these are little tiny dots that are on top of your card. This comes right out of the factory, most likely. Sometimes, a fingerprint got on it, or just little pieces of dust were on the surface during printing. But this is kind of the first thing we observe when we look to grade a Prism card. Second off is centering. Centering is one of the easier things to identify on a card, whether or not it is good or bad. The best centering that you can get is 50-50. This is where, kind of look at where the black is on this card, okay, on the edge of the border. See the space between the edge of the card and that black? It should be even on both sides. That is key to identifying centering. So on this Evan Mobley card, I would probably consider this 55-45. This left side is slightly better spaced than the right side. The right side is pushed to the border a little bit more. Typically, PSA may let you off on 55-45, sometimes 60-40, but you really want to make sure your card is perfectly centered. This applies to up and down and left to right, or top and bottom, whatever you want to call it. But you can tell this card, top and bottom wise, is pushed to the top a little bit more. See that space? That space there is much smaller than it is, sorry about the glare there, on the bottom. There is more space between where it says Cleveland Cavaliers than there is where that top of the Prism logo is kind of coming off there. So that's something else very important to keep in mind when you go to grade a card. Strategy we like to use when determining whether or not to grade is, does a PSA 9 increase the price of the card? A good tip is that you have to assume even the best pack fresh looking card is going to get a 9. We've had, at this point in time, we've sent hundreds of cards to PSA grading, and you'll get a card that you think looks absolutely perfect, nothing wrong with it, and it gets an 8 or a 9. Those type of things just happen. So that's something to be prepared for, especially, if it's a card that you have for sentimental reasons. You really probably don't care about the grade as much, but if you're looking to resell it, you got to think if a card in a 9 is equivalent to that in a raw form, which means ungraded, if it takes a month to send a PSA, pay for insurance, shipping, whether you do it through your local card shop or do it yourself. If that card is the same, you may want to reconsider because, if a 9 raises the value, then you're golden because now you're limiting your risk when it comes to grading that card. I'll provide another example here. So this is Prism, Topps Chrome, Mosaic, Select. These are called chromium cards. This has that shiny, almost plasticky finish to the front. There's the back. This is what a lot of your refractors, or Panini calls them prisms. But if we look at a paper card here, this is a Pat Freiermuth Absolute Rookie. There are a couple different metrics you want to look at. So right away, these paper cards have some things better than chromium cards when it comes to grading, and some things worse. For example, what we like to call our tipped corners. These occur more on paper cards. Can on chromium cards. I'll show that in a little bit here. But if you look, the corners are kind of tipped inwards. This one, top right, is specifically bad. And this is something that could, trick a lot of people just getting into grading, because when you look at this card straight on, it doesn't really look like there's anything wrong with the corners. Now, you can take a magnifying glass, just for the sake of the video, where if you have no supplies, you're just doing this with your naked eye. That's what we'll do for this card here, but see how those corners are tipped inward? This is something that will lower the grade of the card. This can also be outward. Sometimes the corners of these type of cards like to fray. If you look at this one, never like destroying a card, but I'll kind of show you what I mean here. The front and the back are just coming apart. This can be pack fresh, or if you purchase a card from someone, when they go to put it into a sleeve, the edge kind of caught. That can damage the corners as well. So that's something to keep in mind for these paper cards. This is sets like Absolute, Donruss, Topps Series 1 and 2. It's pretty easy to tell a paper versus a chrome card. Just look at the front and kind of explains itself right away. But another metric you want to look at for either type of card is the surface. With the Prism card, I showed you what dimples are. But even paper cards, you got to watch out for scratches. There can be dimples as well if someone kind of indented their finger again or hit the card with something. And these flaws can sometimes be very hard to detect with your naked eye. So please make sure to get your card under some bright light, examine the entire surface, kind of see, look at where the glare is when you're looking at your own card. Does it look perfect? Do you see little flaws? These are things that PSA, they have better equipment than any of us when it comes to grading a card. So they will be judging these just, 10 times harsher than the person owning the card, because, when you're grading a card, you want to be optimistic, thinking everything will get a 10, but sometimes that can be a little bit blinding. Another example that I had here was, let's see where it went, right here, this Anthony Edwards 2021 Mosaic Disco variation here. See, this is a card that I looked over 4 or 5 times before determining not to grade. We go through our first couple basic things in our checklist. Always make sure to check the corners. As I showed you with the other card, you gotta look for tipping, separating. A good tip, literally, is that, is the corner sharp? Some people may call this crisp or whatever, but I like to say sharp. Does it make a nice, 90-degree angle point? If it's not, that means there may be a flaw with the card. But this was a card that we purchased and really wanted to send in for grading. But see, this is the importance of shining a bright light on every part of the card. Right between his legs there is a large scratch. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but it looks like it's picking it up a little bit. And scratches are something that PSA does not take lightly. I would say surface damage is, every grading company is very big on eye appeal, and surface damage can severely diminish your grade. This is a very sharp card, and I think it would probably get a 7 or an 8 because of that flaw. But Moving on here, something else you have to keep in mind when going to grade a card is what's called a print line. A print line is another one of those flaws that you have absolutely no control of, that it comes straight out of the pack like that. I don't know if I can find an example of one here, but let's see what we got. So we use this as an example here. Got this Daniel Rodriguez Select UFC Prism rookie. But look right there, right above the rookie card symbol and downwards. It may not pick up on camera, but there is a line from the printer running up and down this card. And this is something that is a little bit easier to identify. There's some chromium cards, especially refractors, where there'll be almost a large bar across. This would be a large print line. Sometimes those are like a quarter of an inch or so. This will, hurt the grade no matter how perfect everything else is. But just look along the pattern of the card. That's what I like to do. Do you see any, irregularities, lines up and down, left to right? This does not hurt your grade as much as a surface flaw would, but is definitely something to keep in mind when going to grade a card, because at the end of the day, the goal is to get as many 10s as possible. Another example we have here. Now this is an example of a card with a black back. Historically, these type of cards get absolutely crushed at grading, a lot like the 1971 Topps baseball set, because black color on the back of the card just picks up surface flaws so much more than any other colors. If you look here, the bottom of this Chris Boswell rookie has tons of whitening. Whitening just means a little bit of the paint, there we go, on the card is chipping. That creates that white there. And along the bottom, this card would most likely grade maybe a 7 or an 8. But definitely something to keep in mind with cards with a black finish. If it looks perfect, that card may be very low population, which just means how many of that card in a PSA holder is out there. Low pop PSA 10s or 9s, 8s for vintage, whatever, can really increase the value of a card. But at the end of the day, there's a reason why that value is increased, because it's so hard to get a 10. Show you another example here. This Cade Cunningham Select Silver, just boom, right off the top. You can notice Cade is shifted to the right there. The border is so much skinnier on the right than is the left. This is a flaw that's huge in popular Panini products because they have to produce so much at one time. Quality control goes down, and you can just tell right away this card is severely off-centered and would be a no-go for grading. Let's see what else we have here. Another example of an off-centered paper card would be this Ben Roethlisberger rookie. Same scenario. There are some sets where centering is harder to tell, like Mosaic. These patterns aren't necessarily even on both sides, like a Prism card. There's these hectagons, whatever they are, type of pattern, but nothing that is clearly left to right or up and down. For a card like this, honestly, I would just look up a 10. See what that type of centering looks like. The back is obviously easier to tell on these cards because they are the same as a Prism card. See, there's a good example of a print line. Print lines can occur on the back and the front. Right there, right down the middle of Anthony Edwards is a huge line. Almost looks like a cut, but it's not. It's just straight from the press. And a little one running left to right there. This card would not grade high. Show you a few other examples. This is an example of a card that I think would grade extremely well. And we can go through our checklist and see why this card would get a 10, potentially. Again, no 10 is ever guaranteed, but this is just a Tylan Wallace Disco Prism rookie out of 75. Right off the beat, the left and right bordering looks absolutely perfect. Evenly spaced on each side. The right may be pushed to the that end slightly, but I do not think it would be enough to diminish the grade. top and bottom, the card looks perfectly centered. Same distance from the top as there is the bottom. Check out our corners. Nice 90-degree angle on the left. I said grangle. Angle. Perfect on the right. Two bottoms as well. Looking nice and clean there. Flip our card over to the back. Again, nice centering on this one. No tip corners. Shine that in the light. Do not see any print lines or surface flaws. Couple little dots, but I think this card would have an extremely good chance of grading a PSA 10. Something else that is important to keep in mind is what era is your card from? It's not necessarily proven, but PSA does grade vintage cards. Specifically from like the 80s and 90s, I would consider pretty harsh. I think they like to keep the population of these type of cards pretty low in order to keep the value high. There are cards from the 80s that are $4 or $5 raw, but a couple $100 in a PSA 10 because there's just so little 10s out there. So in order to keep that demand for people to keep sending those cards, PSA does not hand out 10s easily. If the population of, I don't know, let's say a 1983 Topps Nolan Ryan is in the thousands, people will just stop sending that card in. When it comes to older vintage, I'd consider this maybe the 50s, maybe the 40s to 70s post-war era. These type of cards are often a little more reasonable because lower grades still have a ton of value, especially, you know, major stars, rookie cards, you know, Mickey Mantle, whoever. Those are often worth grading if you believe they are in really good shape. But yeah, I think overall grading has a great value proposition. You can really increase the value of your cards, but there are many things to keep in mind as we discussed today. And remember, no matter what your card looks like, it can always come back a lower grade, so be prepared for that. We like to send out at least 25 cards at a time, and I would say on average, 10% of them have grades that we didn't expect. Sometimes this is good. I know there was a card in our last submission that I really didn't think would get a 10, and it did. But sometimes, you know, I had a Pokemon card in that submission that I thought would get an 8 or a 9, and it got a 6. So no matter how prepared you are, you can always end up disappointed. So just keep that in mind. There are a couple different grading sites you can go with. PSA offers the highest return on your money often. I know right now, bulk submissions, let's say you go through your local card shop or you sign up for a membership yourself, are $19 a card, up to $500 in value, I want to think. And TCG cards, so Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, stuff like that is $15. There is also SGC. SGC offers a better return on your money for vintage cards, or maybe about equivalent to PSA. There's also Beckett, BGS. This is good for Bowman rookie cards in baseball. They do pretty well with rookie patch autos, which are thicker cards. That reminds me I can cover a patch card before we get off here, as soon as I find one. There are grading companies like CSG. They're a newer one. They offer relatively cheap grading. I know right now it's come down quite a bit from those other companies, so the value may not be there as much, but they are definitely an option. Seems like they're growing. Their values hold decently well in their slabs. Overall, we do PSA the most, but I can show you a patch autograph card real quick and how we would assess this one. So let's get out of its sleeve here. These thick cards have an extremely tough time with corners. Corners are often indented, peeling. For example, we got this Israel, not to butcher his name, Adesanya. UFC fighter. And you can see right off the bat, there's a small little surface dent by the Crown Royale logo there, a little bit off to the right. These type of cards, you know, when you go to buy a patch card or a patch autograph, people are often a little more lenient with conditional flaws as opposed to a Prism card. When people are buying a Prism card, a lot of times people are looking to grade on these type of cards, is not as necessary. This is a card I would not grade. I think it would get a 7, maybe an 8 if you're lucky. But there are so many other things going on with this card, like a nice game-used event-worn patch, low-numbered, where grading a card may not add a significant amount of value versus the risk of grading it. So something else to keep in mind where low-numbered cards, for example, I saw Sam Howell 101, Rookie Nebula, graded a PSA 5 being sold on eBay the other day. I don't know why that card would even get graded in the first place, unless the person just didn't know about the flaw. From the pictures, I couldn't see what it was, but I would assume it was either a massive printing flaw, like a huge indent, along with maybe some bad corners, or a huge print line. But, 101s or 1 of 10s, or out of 2s, whatever, those cards are already so limited that grading them may not be the best idea, especially if there's a flaw with them, because they're already quite rare and quite valuable. There's no other copies that you really need to differentiate it from in the first place. Like a base Prism card, this card, there's probably, tens of thousands of copies of it. So getting a 10 of it, now there's only 200 copies of it. That makes it more rare, more desirable, scarcer. When you first get into grading, it could be very exciting to send in every single card you can find, especially if a 10 is really high priced. But always make sure to sit down, look over every card, because it's fun until you get your PSA grades after you just paid $800 to grade them all, and you get a bunch of 7 and 8s because you didn't go over each card maybe as much as it should have been looked over. But that's all for today, guys. Hope you all enjoyed. Not the most exciting video in the world, but definitely good to look over if you're going to go and create your first PSA submission. So good luck with any cards you send. Hope this helped. And as always, stay tuned for more videos. And make sure to like. Thank you.